My name is Emily Zarka, and I'm a monster expert. I believe there is no better barometer of the values and fears of our society than the monsters our cultures create. From racial violence to the scientific history of anatomy, the lingering effects of terrorism and nuclear war to artificial intelligence, the horror genre provides us with progressive, provocative narratives. Yet there seems to be something about these kinds of texts that makes them unworthy of serious conversation. Critics, beginning as early as the 18th century with harsh reviews of Gothic literature, and continuing today with the negative reviews of horror films, there's an unfortunate historical precedent for this oversight. Critics are apt to point out plot holes, accuse texts of unnecessary violence and gore, even attribute to them the corruption of youth. And most significantly, people look at monsters and think they're one-dimensional, that they're ridiculous. But they are wrong. Failure to study monsters is to ignore the anxieties and desires that cause their creation in the first place. To study monsters is to examine the cultural narratives that contextualize large social issues in our society. My goal is to give people the access and knowledge to better understand how cultural narratives react and work in their everyday lives. The monster is a mirror, a reflection of what we value and whom or what we deem to be undesirable. I would like to argue that human history is, in fact, monster history. So I'm interested in all different kinds of monsters, but I'm particularly fascinated by the undead. Vampires, zombies, mummies, walking skeletons. The reanimated corpse is particularly significant because it most closely resembles the human body. Thus, when the living come in contact with such a creature, we are forced to acknowledge our own existences and identify our own monstrous qualities. Thus far, my work with the monsters has been incredibly successful. And tracing the history of the vampire, I have identified the template for this character, and even this one, not in Bram Stoker's Dracula, but in the poetry of a woman named Charlotte Dacre in 1805. This reveals a feminine and feminist history of horror that has previously gone unrecognized. My work with zombies produced a chapter for an upcoming book, Race, Gender, and Sexuality in The Walking Dead. My chapter looks at the Walking Dead comic series as an insight into current US anxieties of race, gender, and sexuality as they intersect in the body of this woman, Michonne, and in particular, how her romantic relationships are portrayed in conjunction with a supposedly more heroic male protagonist. I wrote an article for Slate Magazine looking at the last 15 years of zombie films as a way to explain changing global opinions of science in our everyday lives. This publication received over 7,200 page views in less than a week. A link I tweeted of the article appeared in over 4,000 news feeds on that day. I'm always looking for new ways to teach history through monsters. So in addition to teaching upper level courses, my knowledge of the horror film has led me to be a reoccurring guest lecturer in 4 introductory film and media courses, each averaging 100 students. I'm an active participant in the Frankenstein Bicentennial project, a 2-year interdisciplinary effort by ASU to engage the public with Mary Shelley's most famous text. My contributions include this museum-style library exhibit, and I also provided annotations for a forthcoming MIT Press publication of Mary Shelley's text, which will be available for free online to the public. I've spoken at a local horror convention, but I've also presented at 7 national and international academic conferences. I even went to a local middle school this January and taught 3 classes of 6th graders about ancient Egyptian burial practices and social hierarchy using mummies. In the future, I hope to mobilize my knowledge of the monster to publish books for both public and scholarly audiences. But for the greatest impact, one day I'd like to have my own television show on a network like the History Channel or the Discovery Channel, where I would travel the globe visiting different countries and communities and exploring the unique monsters in their individual histories. With viewership reaching over 1 million people on each of these networks, such a project would expose a wide audience to the complex historical and social motivations that have caused every single culture since the beginning of time to create monstrous bodies. My work shows that there is an approachable way to engage everyone from children to academics in thoughtful conversation about larger social issues. The monster is a way to talk about poverty, racism, sexism, discrimination, and the social condition in a way that's exciting and approachable. To understand monstrosity is to understand humanity and to impact how it advances in the future. So I ask, What are you afraid of? Thank you.